The phone rang at 10:47 p.m. in the executive suite, and Diana Sterling's voice cracked as she struggled with words she couldn't understand. Kevin Murphy had been cleaning the same spot on the marble floor for 3 minutes, his mop frozen mid-stroke, listening to the rapid Dutch flooding through the speakerphone. The woman behind the mahogany desk looked smaller than her reputation suggested, her billion-dollar empire suddenly meaningless against a language barrier she couldn't cross. When Kevin heard the name Hendrik van der Meer spill from the caller's lips, something cold settled in his stomach, a recognition that tasted like betrayal and smelled like burned dreams. He stepped forward, his janitor's uniform a stark contrast against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Manhattan's skyline, and spoke into the phone with the fluency of someone who had once belonged to a different world entirely. Diana's eyes went wide. "Wait," she said, her hand already reaching toward him, desperation replacing the authority in her voice. "Please don't go." Kevin had always been good at making himself invisible. It was a skill he'd perfected over the past 3 years, moving through sterling hospitality groups' executive floors like a ghost in navy blue coveralls. The 42nd floor was his domain after 10 p.m., when the executives had abandoned their glass offices. He preferred the solitude, the way his footsteps echoed softly against marble that cost more per square foot than most people made in a month. It gave him time to think about Mia, asleep in their small Queen's apartment, her math homework spread across their kitchen table like a promise of a future he was determined to give her. Diana Sterling's corner suite was always last, partly because it required the most work, and partly because he'd grown accustomed to the quiet dignity of the space. Her desk held 3 framed photographs, her late father, Thomas Sterling, the company's flagship restaurant, and herself at some charity gala, smiling the practiced smile of someone who'd learned to carry weight alone. Kevin understood that smile. He wore a similar one every morning when he dropped Mia off at school, projecting confidence he didn't always feel. Tonight felt different. Diana was still here, stress radiating from her hunched shoulders as she stared at her laptop screen. Kevin had learned to read the signs of corporate crisis over his years of invisible observation, but he'd never seen Diana Sterling look genuinely afraid before tonight. The phone's shrill ring cut through the office like a blade, and Kevin watched Diana's face change as she answered. Her confidence evaporated the moment the voice on the other end began speaking rapid Dutch. Kevin's hands tightened on his mop handle as he recognized the aggressive tone, the particular cadence that could only belong to one person. Hendrik van der Meer. The name alone transported Kevin back 8 years, to Amsterdam kitchens filled with steam and ambition, to dreams that had turned to ash in his mouth. He'd spent years trying to forget that voice, the way it could shift from charming to venomous in a single breath. Diana's face had gone pale as she listened to words she clearly couldn't comprehend. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," she said into the phone, frustration bleeding through her professional composure. "Could you please speak English?" The voice grew more aggressive, and Kevin saw something he'd never witnessed before. Diana Sterling, looking utterly powerless. When Kevin heard Hendrik mention something about destroying her reputation, his body moved before his mind could stop it. He stepped into Diana's line of sight and spoke directly into the speakerphone, his Dutch flowing as naturally as breathing, despite years of deliberate disuse. "Hendrik," he said, his voice carrying 8 years of history. "Je bent nog steeds dezelfde manipulatieve lafaard als vroeger." The silence that followed was deafening. When Hendrik's uncertain voice came through the speaker, "Kevin? Kevin Murphy? That's impossible." The line went dead, leaving them alone in heavy silence. Diana's eyes moved from the phone to Kevin's face, searching for answers. "How do you know my executive chef?" she asked steadily. "And where did you learn to speak Dutch like that?" Kevin shifted his weight, acutely aware of his uniform, the mop still clutched like a shield against a past he'd tried desperately to bury. "I should go check on my daughter," Kevin said, taking a step toward the door. but Diana's voice stopped him cold. "That man just threatened to destroy my company, and you clearly know something about him that I don't. I've been watching you clean these offices for 2 years, Kevin. You're careful, methodical, and you notice everything. Tonight, you just saved me from making what could have been a catastrophic mistake." She stood up, commanding the room despite her small frame. "The least you can do is explain how." Kevin's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Rodriguez, his neighbor who watched Mia. "She's fine, sleeping soundly. Take your time." The message felt like permission. He looked at Diana and saw something he recognized. The exhaustion of someone carrying too much weight alone. Maybe it was that recognition, or maybe it was Hendrik's voice bringing back every nightmare he'd tried to forget. But Kevin found himself walking back toward her desk. "Hendrik van der Meer destroyed my life once before," Kevin said quietly. "If he's threatening you the same way he threatened me, then you're in more trouble than you know." Diana gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down, Kevin, and start from the beginning." As he settled into the expensive leather, Kevin felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. The last time he'd told this story, it had cost him everything. But looking at Diana's determined expression, he realized that this time, the truth might actually save something. The story came out in pieces, like shards of glass Kevin had been carrying for years. Amsterdam in 2015, where he'd been the rising star at Le Bernardin's sister restaurant, creating dishes that critics called transcendent. Hendrik had been his sous chef, charming enough to hide the calculating mind beneath his smile. He was jealous. Kevin explained. "I was 28, getting offers from restaurants across Europe, and Hendrik couldn't stand being in my shadow. The betrayal had been masterful in its simplicity. Hendrik had systematically documented Kevin's recipes, photographed his techniques, and built relationships with Kevin's suppliers and staff. When the food poisoning outbreak hit, Hendrik had been ready with evidence pointing directly at Kevin's signature dish. 23 people hospitalized," Kevin said hollowly. "The health department found contaminated ingredients in my prep area that Hendrik had planted, but I couldn't prove it." The investigation was swift and brutal. Kevin's reputation crumbled overnight. His visa was revoked, and he'd been forced to return to New York with nothing. "I met my wife Rachel when I got back," Kevin continued, his voice softening. "She was a nurse who didn't care that I'd lost everything. We got married, had Mia, and for a while I thought maybe Amsterdam was just the price I'd paid for finding my real life." Diana's expression grew grim as the story unfolded. "Rachel got sick when Mia was 2, leukemia. The medical bills ate through our savings, and I couldn't get hired at any decent restaurant because Hendrik's lies had followed me, so I took whatever work I could find." Diana walked to her window, looking out at the endless city lights. "Rachel died 3 years ago," Kevin added quietly. "I kept the cleaning job because it let me be home with Mia in the evenings. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was good enough. Until tonight." When Diana turned back, her expression had hardened into something Kevin recognized from business magazines, a CEO preparing for war. "Hendrik has been my executive chef for 8 months," Diana said, controlled anger in her voice. "He came with impeccable references and European credibility that our investors love. Our flagship restaurant's revenue increased 30% since he arrived." She paused, processing the implications. "But for the past month, he's been making demands. Tonight's call was his ultimatum. Give him what he wants, or he'll reveal information that could destroy Sterling Hospitality's reputation." Kevin felt the familiar chill of recognition. He's using the same playbook. Build trust, prove his value, then leverage whatever secrets he's discovered. What kind of information does he claim to have? Diana returned to her desk and pulled out a manila folder. 6 months ago, we had a minor violation at one of our restaurants. Nothing serious, just a paperwork issue with our liquor license. Hendrik somehow got copies and is threatening to spin it as a pattern of negligence that could trigger investigations into all our locations. The magnitude hit Kevin like a physical blow. He's not just threatening your reputation. He's threatening your entire business model. One investigation could cascade into audits, license reviews, public relations disasters. He's holding your whole empire hostage. Diana nodded grimly. 23 restaurants, 400 employees, partnerships worth hundreds of millions, all vulnerable to one man's lies. There has to be evidence, Kevin said, leaning forward. Hendrik is methodical, but arrogant. He keeps trophies of his victories. If we could find proof of what he did to me, it might discredit his threats against you. Diana's eyes sharpened. What kind of proof? Kevin thought back to Amsterdam. Photos, recipes, maybe recordings. Hendrik documented everything to protect himself, but that documentation could be turned against him. Diana was already reaching for her phone. I have resources you didn't have in Amsterdam. Private investigators, forensic accountants, people who specialize in corporate espionage. Kevin felt a spark of hope for justice, tempered by worry. Diana, you need to understand what you're getting into. If we go after him and fail, he won't just hurt Sterling Hospitality. He'll come after anyone who stood in his way. The weight of that truth settled between them. Diana made her calculations, weighing risks against rewards. I have a board meeting tomorrow morning. They're going to ask about Hendrik's demands, and I need real answers, not just suspicions. She looked directly at Kevin. Are you willing to help me bring him down? Kevin's phone buzzed. Another text from Mrs. Rodriguez. Mia asked about you before bed. I told her you were helping someone important. The message felt like a sign, reminding him of values he'd tried to instill about helping others and doing what's right. He thought about Rachel, who'd always encouraged him to fight for his dreams. Most of all, he thought about every person Hendrik might hurt if no one stopped him. Yes, Kevin said, his voice steady with resolve. But we do this smart, and we do it together. Diana smiled for the first time that evening. Then we start tonight. I'm cancelling tomorrow's board meeting and buying us time to investigate. My lawyers can stall Hendrik for a week, maybe 2. She opened her laptop, typing rapidly. You're also taking a leave of absence from cleaning duties. You're now Sterling Hospitality's consultant on European culinary fraud, with full access to company resources. Kevin felt the world shifting beneath his feet, but this time the change felt like possibility rather than catastrophe. What about Mia? I can't disappear into some investigation and leave her wondering. Diana paused, understanding flashing across her face. Bring her here tomorrow after school. Sterling has an excellent daycare program, and I think it's time she saw what her father is really capable of. The next morning brought crisp October clarity that made Manhattan look like a movie set. Kevin had barely slept, but he felt more awake than he had in years. Over breakfast, Mia chatted about her field trip, while Kevin considered how to explain the changes coming to their lives. Mrs. Rodriguez said you were helping someone important yesterday, she said. Was it like helping someone sick or in trouble? A little bit of both, sweetheart, Kevin said, kneeling to help with her backpack. Sometimes grown-ups need help standing up to bullies. The lady I helped wants to meet you this afternoon. Mia's eyes widened with excitement. Is she really important? Like princess important or president important? Kevin smiled. Businesswoman important. She runs a company that owns lots of restaurants. Sterling Hospitality's headquarters looked different in daylight. Less intimidating, more like a monument to American ambition. Diana was waiting with coffee and documents thick enough to constitute a novel. I didn't sleep much either, she admitted. But my insomnia was productive. I've got investigators working on Hendrik's background, accountants reviewing his records, and cybersecurity examining his digital footprint. Any early results? Kevin asked. Diana's expression was grim as she opened the folder. More than expected, all bad news. Hendrik van der Meer isn't his real name. He was born Henrik van der Meer in Belgium, using variations of Dutch names for 15 years. My investigators found evidence of at least 3 other incidents similar to yours. Talented chefs suddenly ruined by mysterious scandals, always with Henrik nearby to benefit. Kevin felt anger mixed with vindication. After 8 years of wondering if he'd deserved his fate, learning he was part of a pattern felt validating and infuriating. So he's been doing this for over a decade. How has he gotten away with it? Diana pulled out photographs showing Hendrik at various restaurants across Europe and America. He's smart about choosing targets. Young chefs without networks, people in foreign countries without legal protections. You were perfect. Talented enough to be worth destroying. Isolated enough that no one would believe you. The systematic cruelty was staggering. Kevin studied the photos, seeing his younger self in the other victims. What happened to the others? Diana's jaw tightened. 2 left the industry entirely. One died by suicide 18 months after his restaurant failed. Another struggled with addiction before finally opening a food truck in Portland. The weight of those ruined lives settled in Kevin's chest, along with growing determination. There's more, Diana continued, pulling out financial documents. Cybersecurity found encrypted files we shouldn't legally access, but they show Hendrik's been documenting his manipulations, including detailed plans for taking over Sterling Hospitality once he's neutralized me. Kevin's blood pressure rose as Diana described the scheme. Bankrupting Sterling through manufactured scandals, then purchasing assets through shell companies established with stolen money. He's not planning to destroy your company. He's planning to steal it entirely, Kevin realized. How long would that take? Diana's expression grew serious. 18 months? Maybe 2 years? He'd own one of America's largest restaurant chains, built on ashes of businesses he systematically destroyed. The thought was almost unbearable, but it crystallized Kevin's resolve. What's our timeline? Kevin asked. How long before he realizes we're investigating? Diana checked her buzzing phone. My lawyers bought maybe a week by requesting documentation, but Hendrik isn't stupid. He'll figure out what we're doing. We need concrete evidence fast. Kevin thought about years of watching people from shadows, learning to read situations before they became crises. I have an idea, Kevin said slowly. Hendrik's weakness has always been his ego. He can't resist bragging about his victories. If we could get him to confess to Amsterdam, record him admitting to his pattern of fraud, it would destroy his credibility and probably land him in prison. Diana's eyebrows rose with interest. What did you have in mind? Kevin pulled out his phone, scrolling to a number he'd never quite deleted. I'm going to call him back. Set up a meeting. This time, we're going to be ready. The plan they developed was risky and complicated, dependent on Kevin's ability to manipulate the man who had destroyed his life. Diana would arrange surveillance equipment and legal observers while Kevin drew Hendrik into a trap. The key is making him believe he's won, Kevin explained. If I can appeal to his ego and greed simultaneously, he might reveal enough to hang himself. When Mia arrived that afternoon, Diana made a point of personally welcoming her. I was nervous about meeting your father's boss too, Diana told her. But it turns out he's pretty amazing at his job. Mia studied Diana with frank curiosity, clearly impressed by the luxury, but more interested in the woman herself. Daddy says you help people who are being bullied. Are you like a superhero for business? Diana laughed genuinely. More like a detective. Your daddy is helping me solve an important mystery about someone who hasn't been telling the truth. The presence of his daughter in Diana's office felt surreal, like separate worlds colliding. But watching them interact, Kevin realized the boundaries between those worlds had been more artificial than he'd believed. The call to Hendrik took place the next morning at exactly 9 o'clock, with Diana listening on a secure line and recording equipment, capturing every word. When Hendrik's familiar voice answered, Kevin felt transported back to Amsterdam. Kevin Murphy, Hendrik said, amused. I thought you were dead or completely broken. How delightfully unexpected to discover you're working as a janitor for the woman I'm about to destroy. Kevin forced himself to sound defeated, desperate. I need to see you, Hendrik. There are things we need to discuss. Hendrik's laughter was cold. The great Kevin Murphy, crawling back to beg for scraps. Tell me, what do you think you have to offer me? Kevin delivered the words they'd practiced. Information about Diana Sterling's operations that you can't get any other way. I've been cleaning her offices for 2 years, seen documents, overheard conversations. The silence stretched before Hendrik's tone shifted to genuine interest. Continue. Kevin proposed meeting at Sterling Plaza restaurant the next evening. Hendrik agreed with casual arrogance, then delivered a chilling threat. Don't disappoint me, Kevin. I'd hate to destroy what little life you've managed to rebuild for yourself and that pretty daughter of yours. The threat against Mia sent ice through Kevin's veins, but Diana was already coordinating security. He knows about Mia, Kevin said. If this goes wrong, he won't just come after us. Diana's expression hardened with cold fury. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. I'm putting security on Mia immediately, and she'll be in protective custody until this is resolved. Hendrik made a mistake threatening a child. That guaranteed I'll use every resource to destroy him completely. The next evening, Kevin arrived early at Sterling Plaza, using his familiarity with company operations to position surveillance equipment. The irony of confronting Hendrik in a restaurant wasn't lost on him. Food had been the center of both his greatest dreams and worst nightmare. Hendrik arrived precisely on time, unchanged except for silver threading his hair and new lines speaking of years perfecting predatory skills. Kevin Murphy, Hendrik said, settling with theatrical pleasure. You look older, more tired, exactly as broken as I hoped. I'm curious what desperation has driven you to seek me out. Kevin had prepared carefully, but sitting across from his destroyer required every ounce of self-control. The recording device felt like a lifeline, promising that this time the truth would be captured. You won, Kevin said, letting defeat color his voice. You destroyed everything I'd worked to build. I've spent 8 years cleaning offices and trying to forget what it felt like to create something beautiful. But I learned how to listen, how to observe, how to become invisible where important conversations happen. Hendrik leaned back, enjoying Kevin's apparent surrender while evaluating potential information value. Kevin delivered the fabricated intelligence Diana's team had prepared, mixing real corporate information with fictional scandals designed to make Hendrik believe he was gaining ammunition. With each revelation, Hendrik grew more animated, more willing to share details about his own operations. You always were cleverer than you appeared, Hendrik said, raising his wine glass mockingly. I almost regret destroying you in Amsterdam. We could have been partners. The casual cruelty stirred Kevin's suppressed rage, but he forced himself to play the broken man seeking scraps. Partners? He asked, letting hope creep into his voice. Hendrik leaned forward, eyes bright with anticipation. I'm going to own Sterling Hospitality within 18 months, Kevin. Not manage it. Own it outright. Diana Sterling will lose everything the same way you did, except her fall will be from greater heights. The recording device captured every word as Hendrik outlined his scheme with detailed pride, believing he was speaking to a fellow sociopath rather than his intended victim. The beauty of it, Hendrik continued, is that Diana will destroy herself trying to fight charges that have just enough truth mixed with lies to be believable. Just like you did in Amsterdam. Kevin felt the moment had come for the most dangerous part. Amsterdam was masterful, how you orchestrated my downfall. I never understood how you managed the details, got contaminated ingredients into my prep area without anyone seeing. Hendrik's smile widened with genuine pleasure at Kevin's apparent admiration. Patience and planning, Kevin. I spent months documenting your routines, recipes, relationships. When I finally moved, every piece was in place. The contaminated shellfish was almost too easy, replacing your fresh ingredients with deliberately spoiled ones, then ensuring health inspectors would find them at precisely the right moment. Hendrik sipped his wine, savoring both alcohol and memory. 23 people hospitalized, Kevin said quietly. Hendrik shrugged with chilling indifference. Collateral damage. None died, and their suffering served a greater purpose, removing an obstacle to my advancement. I've refined the technique since then. The chef in Barcelona only suffered 12 cases before his reputation was destroyed. Prague required falsified invoices and tax evasion evidence, but results were equally satisfying. The casual discussion of ruining lives for advancement made Kevin's stomach turn, but also filled him with fierce satisfaction. Every word was preserved for legal proceedings that would finally bring justice. "And Diana Sterling?" Kevin asked. "How will you handle her destruction?" Hendrik's expression grew calculating. "Diana is different from previous targets. She has resources, connections, ability to fight back. But she also has more to lose. And she's made the mistake of caring about employees, reputation, her father's legacy. I'll use that compassion against her the same way I used your artistic integrity in Amsterdam. The greater their virtue, the more vulnerable they become." Kevin maintained his performance as the defeated victim. "You've thought of everything. But what happens when you own Sterling Hospitality? Won't people become suspicious?" Hendrik laughed with confidence of someone never held accountable. "People see what they want to see. They'll see a talented European chef who built an empire through skill and determination. The victims I destroyed will be forgotten footnotes. History is written by victors, and I intend to be the only victor standing." Instead of strangling him, Kevin delivered the line that would end Hendrik's reign. "To the most successful predator I've ever met, and to the recording device that's been capturing every word of your confession for the past 45 minutes. Hendrik's face went white as realization hit, his wine glass freezing halfway to his lips. The restaurant's elegant atmosphere shattered as Diana's security team moved in, while federal agents emerged from adjacent tables. "Hendrik van der Meer, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, racketeering, and conspiracy across multiple jurisdictions." Hendrik's shock gave way to fury as handcuffs closed around his wrists, his composure crumbling into predatory rage. "This is impossible," Hendrik snarled. "Kevin Murphy is a nobody, a broken janitor with no credibility." But Diana appeared with cold satisfaction. "Actually, they'll believe your recorded confession, along with testimony from other victims and documentary evidence my investigators have gathered." Kevin watched Hendrik led away and felt complex emotions. Vindication, relief, closure, and something that might have been forgiveness. The weeks following Hendrik's arrest passed in a blur of legal proceedings and gradual adjustment to unimaginable reality. Hendrik's confession became cornerstone of a federal case exposing culinary fraud spanning multiple countries and dozens of destroyed careers. Kevin found himself testifying, speaking with prosecutors, helping other victims find voices after years of shame. The process was exhausting but healing, each day bringing him closer to reclaiming his stolen identity. When Mia returned from protective custody, she was full of questions about why their lives had become complicated. Kevin struggled to explain in terms a 6-year-old could understand, finally settling on simple truth that sometimes adults had to stand up to bullies. "Did you win, Daddy?" she asked as they walked through Central Park's October colors. "Yes, sweetheart, we won," Kevin replied, surprised how good the words felt. "The mean man can't hurt anyone else now." Mia asked the question he'd been dreading. "Does this mean you don't have to clean offices anymore? Can you go back to cooking?" Kevin knelt to meet her eyes, seeing Rachel's curiosity reflected in Mia's earnest expression. "Would you like that?" he asked carefully. "If Daddy went back to cooking, it would mean different schedules, maybe less time at home evenings, but also the chance to do work that makes me happy in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Mia considered this seriously. Mommy always said you cooked best when you were happy. And Diana says happy grown-ups are better at taking care of kids, so I think you should cook if it makes you happy. Diana had offered Kevin oversight of Sterling's new culinary operations, developing a casual dining chain focused on locally sourced ingredients and chef-driven menus. I need someone who understands both creative and business sides, she'd told him. Someone I trust to maintain standards while developing new concepts. The position comes with equity, comprehensive benefits, and flexible scheduling that maintains your priorities as a father. The offer represented everything Kevin had lost, and more than he'd dared hope to regain. But accepting meant stepping back into public eye, taking risks with their stable life, trusting that hard-won happiness wouldn't be destroyed by unforeseen catastrophe. The decision came down to a conversation with Mia while making pancakes in their small Queen's kitchen. "Daddy, are you sad you can't make fancy food anymore?" she asked, measuring ingredients with focused concentration. Kevin considered his answer carefully. "I was sad for a long time," he admitted. "I loved cooking fancy food, and when I couldn't anymore, I felt like I'd lost part of myself. But then you came along, and Mommy got sick, and I learned that taking care of people you love is more important than any job. The cleaning work let me be home every evening, help with homework, read bedtime stories. That was worth more than any fancy restaurant." Mia nodded thoughtfully, then asked the question cutting to his dilemma's heart. "But what if you could do both? What if you could make fancy food and take care of me?" Kevin felt his throat tighten with emotion at his daughter's wisdom. "That would be amazing, wouldn't it?" Mia smiled with confidence of someone who'd never learned to doubt that problems could be solved with determination and love. "Diana said you could?" Mia replied matter-of-factly, flipping her pancake carefully. "She said good companies help parents take care of kids, and that you're too smart to let work be more important than family. I think Diana is pretty smart, so maybe you should listen to her." Kevin watched his daughter navigate pancake preparation with steady hands, realizing she'd inherited more than Rachel's intelligence and compassion. She'd developed her own wisdom about what mattered most. The conversation with Diana took place on a crisp November morning. Manhattan spread below like a promise of possibilities. "I have conditions," Kevin said without preamble, and Diana smiled expectantly. "Tell me what you need." Kevin pulled out his prepared list. Flexible scheduling that prioritizes Mia's needs. No evening meetings conflicting with school functions or bedtime. A private office where she can do homework when necessary. And final approval on any publicity affecting our family's privacy. Diana listened with serious attention before nodding. "Done. But I have one condition of my own." Kevin raised his eyebrows. "I want to be more than just your employer. This partnership, this trust we've developed, it's valuable beyond business relationships. I want us to be friends, real friends who support each other through challenges and celebrate successes. I haven't had many of those, and I don't want to lose what we've found." "I'd like that too," Kevin said, shaking her hand to seal both business arrangement and personal commitment. "But friendship with me comes with additional responsibilities. You'll attend Mia's school plays, birthday parties, and other significant events. You'll also be subjected to detailed questions about your personal life, favorite foods, and Disney movie viewing history. Mia takes quality control for my relationships very seriously." Diana laughed with genuine delight, and Kevin realized their partnership had evolved into something neither expected but both valued. "I think I can handle those requirements. It's been a long time since anyone cared enough to subject me to quality control evaluations." The admission revealed Diana's personal isolation, but strengthened Kevin's sense that accepting her offer was right for both of them. 6 months later, Kevin stood in the kitchen of Sterling Hospitality's newest restaurant, watching dinner service with satisfaction of someone who'd finally found his way home. The restaurant had been his vision, from concept to completion. Locally sourced ingredients, seasonal menus, open kitchen design, letting diners see artistry and precision in every plate. Reviews were spectacular, reservations booked solid for months, and Kevin felt deep contentment from engaging work that served both creativity and purpose. Mia was at her usual corner table, working on homework while keeping one eye on kitchen activity that had become as familiar as their apartment. She'd adapted to their new life with amazing resilience, making friends with restaurant staff and developing sophisticated opinions about food presentation and customer service. "Daddy?" she called during a brief lull. "Table 7 wants their anniversary dinner extra special. They've been married 43 years. Kevin smiled and began preparing an off-menu dessert. Chocolate soufflé with gold leaf decoration he'd learned in Amsterdam but hadn't attempted in 8 years. His hands moved with muscle memory and practiced precision, creating something beautiful through skill, patience, and love. As he worked, Kevin thought about the journey bringing him to this moment. Destruction and exile, years of invisible survival, unexpected alliance with Diana that gave him chance to reclaim dreams without sacrificing what mattered most. Diana appeared at the kitchen pass as Kevin finished plating, her business attire replaced by casual clothes worn when dining as friend rather than owner. "Mia told me about the anniversary couple," she said, admiring his artistic presentation. "That's exactly the gesture that's going to make this place legendary." Kevin handed her the plate, watching as she carried it personally to table 7, her face bright with genuine pleasure in participating in someone else's celebration. The evening wound down with familiar rhythms. Kevin had missed more than he'd realized. Gradual slowing of orders, careful cleaning of stations, the moment when the last customer left, and the restaurant transformed from performance stage back into workspace where creativity could flourish. Mia had fallen asleep in her booth, homework complete, and head pillowed on Diana's jacket. Kevin lifted his daughter carefully, marveling at how light she felt and how much trust she placed in him. "Thank you," he said to Diana as they prepared to leave, words carrying weight beyond politeness. "For believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, for giving me the chance to be both good father and fulfilled professional, for showing Mia what strong, intelligent women can accomplish when they refuse to let obstacles define limitations." Diana's smile was soft with affection and satisfaction. "Thank you for reminding me that success means nothing without people to share it with," Diana replied, "and for letting me be part of your family's story. I never knew how much I was missing until I found what we have together." Kevin felt the truth resonate, along with gratitude for unlikely events that had transformed his life from quiet survival into genuine happiness. As they rode the elevator down, Kevin reflected on the distance traveled from that night when a Dutch phone call had shattered his carefully constructed invisibility. Hendrik was serving 15 years federal prison, his victims had found justice, and Kevin had reclaimed not just his career, but his sense of self-worth and possibility. Most importantly, Mia was thriving in their new life, surrounded by people who valued both her father's talents and their family's happiness. "Daddy?" Mia said sleepily as Kevin tucked her into bed in their new Brooklyn brownstone. "Do you think Mommy would be proud of us?" Kevin smoothed her hair back, thinking about Rachel and the values she'd instilled during her too brief time as wife and mother. "I think she'd be amazed by how brave and smart and kind you've become," he said honestly. "And I think she'd be happy that we found Diana and learned families can grow in unexpected ways." Mia nodded contentedly, already drifting toward sleep with security of someone who'd never doubted being loved and protected. "Will you make pancakes tomorrow? The fancy kind with berries and cream?" Kevin promised he would, already planning a breakfast combining technical skill with simple pleasure of making his daughter happy. As he closed her door, Kevin felt deep satisfaction from knowing he was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Some stories begin with loss and betrayal, with dreams deferred and identities buried beneath survival's weight. But the best stories refuse to end with defeat, finding ways to transform pain into purpose and obstacles into opportunities for unexpected grace. Standing in their Brooklyn hallway, listening to Mia's peaceful breathing and thinking about tomorrow's plans, Kevin Murphy smiled with quiet contentment of someone who'd finally learned that redemption was always possible, that second chances could lead to better outcomes than first attempts, and that the most important ingredient in any recipe for happiness was courage to remain open to love in all its surprising forms.